Well, good afternoon and good evening, everybody from Team Empire and Team Rising Tide. My name is Mark Krebs. I'm a gold qualified consultant with Team Sunset, Amy Edwards' team. This is a motivational talk on overcoming obstacles in life and in business. And some of you I recognize in the chats. You may know my story from last year and into this year, but many of you do not. So that's what this is all about. It is about motivating yourself and staying motivated through the tough times in life and in business. So a little bit about myself. I live in the great state of South Dakota in a small college town, which presents its own challenges as a travel agent. Just because I don't reside in a bigger city. The closest large cities to me are about 45 minutes away, north or south. So I have to rely on some creative marketing to get clients both regionally and nationwide. And I'll talk about that here in just a little while. So I am married. I've been married for 6 years now to my beautiful wife, Becca. I have 3 adorable boys, Christian, who had just turned 19 earlier this month, Blake, who is 10, and MJ, who is my 5-year-old. So they keep us busy all the time with their activities and whatnot. And that's what I love about being a travel agent the most, is the flexibility that I have to be able to work from anywhere. It's hardly ever that you will see me without my laptop and my wireless modem with me doing work, no matter where we are. So I will do a lot of bookings, trainings on the go. So that's one of the reasons why I became a full-time travel agent. I've been doing this for 9.5 years. I've been with Archer and Evolution for 15 months, and the love and support that I have gotten from Archer is second to none. This is the best agency that I have ever worked for, and I've worked for 3 other host agencies in the past. So, but again, I've been doing this for 9.5 years. My first 4.5 years of that was part-time. And I started doing this full-time 5 years ago when I was ready to fire my boss, because I was getting tired of having to punch a time clock every single day and not being appreciated for the work that I did for the company. So, I mean, I was passed up for numerous promotions, always given the worst shifts ever, the graveyard shifts. Sorry, it's a little bit dry here in Vermilion today. But because of that, that made my decision to leave my full-time job and start doing travel as my full-time passion and career much easier. So I was able to fire my own boss about 5 years ago, or my old boss 5 years ago, and I haven't looked back since. So that was one of life's obstacles that were in the way. But this motivational talk is not really about that journey that I had. This is more of one about the journey over the last year when I had just started with Archer. So I started with Archer back on April 5th of 2022. And things were going great for me. I had just started a team build in July of last year. I was building up a fairly good sized team. I had 20 agents under me at that point in time. And then in August, unfortunately, disaster in my family struck in the way of a medical emergency, which I experienced, which nearly cost me my life. So taking it back to August 7th, we had just gotten done celebrating our anniversary the night before, my wife and I. And I woke up the next morning not feeling very well. So we went to my local emergency department here in Vermilion with some abdominal pain. And we thought it was not going to be a big deal. It was something that I had initially thought that I could tough out, but it just kept getting worse and worse throughout the night and throughout the day. So we made the decision, instead of going to an acute care location, even though it was a Sunday, to go to the ER because the pain that I was in was just indescribable. So they ran all their normal tests on me. They ran CT scans, they did MRIs, ultrasounds, everything that they could think of. And they finally diagnosed me with what they thought was a small bowel obstruction. So my doctor was consulted here in Vermilion. He was going to admit me locally to the hospital under his service. Well, during that conversation and during the ensuing conversation with the trauma center in Sioux Falls, which is about 45 minutes north of me, I actually went into shock. My blood pressures bottomed out to 50s over nothing. I was basically clinically dead until they were able to revive me using fluids and medication. And then we knew we had a more serious problem on our hands at that point. So the decision was made for me to be transferred to the larger medical center in Sioux Falls, where I didn't know what was going to happen. I honestly do not remember any of this. I have gotten this information secondhand from my wife, nurses who took care of me both in Vermilion and in Sioux Falls, and from my medical records, because I have no recollection about what was going on to me and how severe everything was, with the exception of these reports that I was getting. So that was a big setback for me, because I was supposed to be doing a vendor fair for 3 days later on that week. So that's one thing that really affected my business. And that was, from what I've been told, that was the only thing that I was thinking about was, what is this going to do to my business? And what I was talking about when I was in the ER is, am I going to still be able to go to the fair and do this vendor booth? Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, as my condition went from stable to critical in a heartbeat. So it was so critical that they tried to dispatch a life flight helicopter and airplane for me to make the trip a lot shorter to Sioux Falls because I was in such critical condition. But unfortunately, they were unable to due to the weather. So they had to provide stabilizing measures for me in Vermilion for 2.5 hours. Additionally, while we waited for a ground ambulance to return from another transfer, 2 other transfers, actually, from what I understand from the ER staff here. And that was one of the hardest times of her life that my wife had to sit through, just seeing me in pain and knowing that I was so sick and that I had nearly died in the ER here in Vermilion. Well, finally, they were able to transfer me up to Sioux Falls. And as soon as we got there, I went into respiratory arrest. So I had to be put onto life support measures in the emergency department. And so they were basically breathing for me during that time in the ER while they were performing repeat scans to figure out what was going on. Well, it was during the scans that they found that I had a very large duodenal ulcer that had perforated, and I was bleeding into my stomach, very large amounts of blood. So I was taken to emergency surgery on August 7th at about 7:30 in the evening, where surgeons worked for 4.5 hours to save my life. Not only did they save my life, but unfortunately, there were complications that ensued after the surgery where I went into septic shock. And I'm going to share my screen right now. And these images are not meant to scare anybody, but it is to show you guys what I was experiencing on August 8th. So let me share my screen here. And let me pull this up into full presentation mode. This was me on August 8th in the surgical intensive care unit with life support measures in place in a medically induced coma. For 7 days, I was like that. with not much improvement. My family didn't know what was happening. My parents flew in all the way from Virginia because of the severity of my illness. My sons were there with me in the room, from what I've been told. I don't remember any of this, obviously, because I was in a coma. But if it wasn't for my wife, I would have had these pictures to show the journey that I have been through. So I was in that coma for 7 days, medically induced, where they were breathing for me. They were supporting all of my life functions and everything after surgery, because I was so septic at the time that my body had just shut down. I was on high doses of multiple IV antibiotics at the time. And all I can remember from that, and for some reason I remember this vividly, was smelling apples on day 6, just when I was about to be extubated on day number 7. And it was like my brain was coming back too and fighting for survival. Well, after those, I ended up spending 10 days in the surgical intensive care unit after surgery before I was transferred to the regular surgical floor in the hospital for another about 3 weeks at that time. And I was so weak, but I still remember thinking, what is my business going to do without me? What is going to happen to it? What is my team going to think? Are they going to think that I just abandoned them? Luckily, that wasn't the case. So I got moved to a rehab facility about a month after I had this near-death experience. And from there, I was able to start working just a little bit, because I still didn't have very much strength or mental stamina to start to be able to do that again. And this was something that I had to push myself to do, even though I was sitting there in a hospital, trying to work, trying to save my business, trying to save my team and be a good leader for my team during that time. Well, I was finally discharged from the hospital on October 10th of last year with a wound manager over my stomach, because I had developed more complications, which were going to require additional surgeries down the road. So I wore that wound manager for 6 months. Follow-up appointments with my surgeon, with the wound management clinics in Sioux Falls, and my primary care physician, not really able to do anything. It took me a good 3 or 4 months to get my strength and stamina back to where I was prior to this emergency happening. During that time, I continued to build my team. I continued to build my business, especially during the time that I was home. But fast forward to March 16th, which is when my correction surgery was scheduled for in Sioux Falls, and we thought everything was going to go just fine. I trusted my surgeon. He was the one who had saved my life initially. And so I was only hospitalized for 3 days at that point. But then I started having more complications from the surgery, where he made the incisions. I started having complications and infections in those areas, which put me in and out of the hospital from March 16th all the way until June 18th of this year. Now, there was about a 3-week period there when I was in and out of the hospital for maybe 15 to 17 days. And I was only home for 4 or 5. During that time, though, while I was sitting in my hospital room, I had my laptop with me. I had all my travel stuff with me so that I could continue to work, because I felt good enough to work at that point, despite the obstacles that I was facing. And I figured out how to overcome those. I gained several clients off of Google listings, off Facebook posts that I made during that time. Well, finally, I was admitted back to the hospital in April 10th to be exact, for an indeterminate period of time because I continued to have issues with complications and infections. And I remained there for another 2 months. During that time, I had 5 different surgeries in less than a 2-month period to try and get my body to stabilize, to take care of what was causing the infections, and to give me time to recuperate and heal. But here's where I turned it into an opportunity. Even though it was an obstacle for me, this has a positive outcome. And I'm not saying that you guys should do this if you are ever in this type of a situation. This was just my tenacity and my stubbornness about trying to put a positive spin onto the situation, with the fact that I was hospitalized for so long. I didn't know when I was getting out, when I was going to be able to go home. So I took the time to market myself, because whenever you go somewhere and you meet somebody, the first thing they always ask you is, what do you do for work? Or what do you do for a living? And my answer is always, I'm a travel agent. I had over 100 business cards with me at the time. I came home with less than 20. I picked up over 75 new clients just from being in the hospital, just from marketing myself as a travel agent to staff members, physicians, nurses, techs, all sorts of people, even volunteers that came into the rooms with therapy dogs to help cheer the patients up. I was marketing myself because that age-old question of what do you do for a living always came up. So I was trying to make the best out of a bad situation. Finally, I had my final surgery on June 8th. I'm happy to report that I am doing very, very well right now. Things have been going extremely well. My surgeon is very happy with the way things are going, and I'm back to normal. I've got vendor fairs lined up all throughout August, the end of this month. My business is booming. My team is continuing to grow. I wish I'd been able to be at a convention with you guys, but my health was not allowing me to do so, but I will definitely be there next year. And I'm hoping to be able to tell my story in less than a 3-minute speech when I receive my gold plaque and or my platinum plaque. That is my goal, is to get those awards because of what I have overcome and what I have had to deal with in the past. So no matter what life throws at you guys, you can always look for a silver lining. It may not be the right opportunity for you. It may not be the right thing that happens to you at the time, but you can always find a way to overcome the situation that you are being dealt at that time. And that is one thing that I have learned throughout this entire experience over the last 10 months, nearly a year now. And I am just really happy to say that I am on the road to recovery now. I am getting back into the business even more so than I was before. This near-death experience has changed me as both a person, as an entrepreneur, as a father, a husband. And it is something that I don't wish upon anybody. But again, like I said, no matter what life throws at you guys, you can overcome it. It may be tough for a while. Yeah. Just look at my journey over the last 10 months. It has been extremely tough. But if there's one thing that I have learned is that you can overcome anything that you put your mind to. And the great Jim Valvano of the NC State Wolfpack, who sadly passed away of cancer several years ago, said one of my favorite quotes of all time: "Don't give up. Don't ever give up." I never gave up on myself. I never gave up on my health. I never gave up on my medical team. I have not given up on my evolution team and my family here. And it is something that I remember every single day, and I do not take my life for granted anymore because life is too precious to take for granted. I take things one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. And it is something that I take pride in doing. So I'm going to stop the recording right now, but I am more than happy to take any questions that you guys may have or listen to any comments that you may have as well. Feel free to unmute yourselves as well.